So this video is going to be a little bit different. I'm referring to it as an ode to Fuji Pro 400H, as you probably read in the title. Now, Pro 400H was and is my favourite film stock personally. It's a film stock that Fuji discontinued January 2021, so yeah, nearly 4 years ago now, and it was special. It was the last colour negative film, professional colour negative film manufactured by Fuji themselves in Japan. Since then, the films have been made by presumably Kodak in the USA. The approach to sort of colour palettes and colour science is different between the manufacturers, and having that variance was always something that I really appreciated. So I'd shot with the Pro 400H for a few years before its discontinuation, and then when it was discontinued, I decided to buy a 100 pack Pro Pack, I guess, which I'm still slowly working through. I think I've currently got about 15 rolls left, and yeah, I'm getting more and more reluctant to shoot it. So I thought I'd just talk about some of the things that I enjoyed about that film, why I think it's so special, and if possible, why you should probably go out and find some to shoot yourself. This film was originally released in 2002, along with an 160 ISO variant and an 800 ISO variant. The 400, for instance, was initially marketed as MPH 400, and then in 2004, all of the names were changed. So the MPH 400 became Pro 400H, and the 800 and the 160 had their own names sort of accordingly. Different films had different characteristics, and there was sort of a whole range of these new professional films that Fuji marketed to portrait photographers, wedding photographers, anyone really, but they were very fine grain. They all had the Fuji 4th colour layer, which was meant to give a more natural colour look to the shots while maintaining sort of dynamic range and saturation. Ultimately, the 800 ISO ended up being discontinued in 2009, and the 160 ISO ended up being discontinued in 2018, which of course was a bit of a loss, but at the time there wasn't as much of a film photography community, so there were less people shooting it, and at the time it didn't really make sense for Fuji to really be pushing a pro film to so few buyers. Ultimately, Fujifilm sort of blamed the discontinuation of Pro 400H on a lack of demand, as well as difficulty acquiring raw materials, which I always thought was strange because the same year that Pro 400H was discontinued, Kodak announced the release of Gold 200 in medium format, and then even more recently, Harman have released their Phoenix film in 120. So there's clearly still a demand. Unfortunately, it probably means that Fuji have dismantled and sold all the machinery that they used to manufacture this film. But for them, they've likely got more stuff going on with their digital cameras as well as the Instax, and they have a very large and expansive medical field, which is understandable. They didn't really want to take a gamble on film photography becoming popular, so for them it was a safer bet to put their eggs in those baskets than it was in a potentially unpredictable film basket, which luckily has paid off for the likes of Kodak. But for Fujifilm, who were always a slightly more successful company, especially when it came to the arrival of digital, they're trying to play it safe, and that does make sense from their point of view. Personally, I think that the biggest downside of all of this is the fact that Fujifilm are no longer going to be manufacturing their own films in Japan. Now that Kodak have taken over making their colour negative films, and Ilford have taken over making their black and white, I feel that the fact that Fujifilm had formulated all of those emulsions in Japan for primarily the Japanese market, where they've done most of their market research, means that you will lose those preferences for skin tones and greenery and those certain tonal ranges which you won't have in the Kodak films. And ultimately that's what separates them so much. That Kodak look is going to become more standardized and will become sort of the film look, whereas before, with multiple manufacturers making their own films based on their own market research and their own testing, that's where you had the variety in film stocks. You are now going to have just that one tonal range and that one sort of flavour profile which you wouldn't have had in the past. That's where I think maybe a new manufacturer of film, someone like Harman, who's now just come out with the Phoenix film, if they could invest in that going forward, that I think would be very beneficial for the film photography community. For me, it was just a great sort of everyday film. It was one that I used for a lot of portraits, but also for sort of more scenic shots. So skin tones really, really accurate, but then also say like greens and blues, they were also really, really nice and vibrant without being too garish. And I found that it was just a very good all-rounder. Think of Kodak Ektar in saturation, dialed back a bit, but with the dynamic range of, say, Portra. It was also a delightfully easy film to work with. So the colours were beautiful straight from scans normally. Usually the only adjustment I really needed to make, other than a general sort of grade in terms of contrast and curves, was removing a little bit of green in the shadows, which was easily done just by adding a bit of magenta. So it really isn't an issue. And ultimately, I think that was one of the things that drew me into the film, having something so easy to work with, where in the past I'd struggled and still do struggle with editing portrait shots, that sort of warm cast doesn't really work in most of the scenes, given how bleak all the UK seasons and weather can be. When I've gone abroad for like holidays and things like that, I tend to use gold, which again has those warmer tones that you find with Kodak films. Back in the UK, the greens and blues I think are slightly more important, and the Fujifilm, that's really where it shines. I currently have about 15 rolls of this film left, and I can feel myself becoming more and more reluctant to shoot it as time goes on. I think the issue for me really, and what I'm trying to say, is how do I find something worthy of shooting on such a beautiful and precious film, which has kind of meant so much to me and is kind of one of the reasons why I have been able to continue shooting film for as long as I have. It's only recently that I've decided to pick up a digital camera, and the reason for that is this YouTube channel. So if you've got any thoughts or any ways to kind of get over that mental hurdle, I'd really appreciate it, because it's something that I do want to shoot. I don't want it to go to waste. I want to be able to shoot it, and I want it to be not just special, but I want it to be well worth it. I don't want this film to go to waste. So I'm going to wrap up my little rambling speeches here. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please feel free to like it. If you've got any questions at all, then of course you can put those down in the comments and I'll get back to those as soon as possible. If you really enjoyed the video and would like to see more from me, don't forget to subscribe. That would be very, very helpful. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.